are really close. What they like is what I call a pocket God. Because when it suits them, out comes this little puppet who says exactly what they say. Oh, yeah, God votes the way I do. God shops the way I do. God watches my TV shows. And God likes my music. Country western, really? Yes. What a shock. And then, as soon as they want to go do stuff, where does God go? Right here. Because God doesn't actually control their lives. They just bring God out so they can control your lives. But there is no idol, whether it's a golden idol 60 feet high or this puppet that I keep in my pocket and bring out when it suits me. It is God who is awe-inspiring and powerful. So when you abuse the name, you are really imposing and saying, I control God. People do not understand the meaning of the word profanity. They confuse vulgarity for profanity. There are a number of words which have developed in the English language which are awfully vulgar and are only appropriate when you really hit your thumb with that hammer. Then they have a purpose, which is to kind of alleviate that pain because everybody else is going, what? The head of Ladies' Aid just used that word? That helps but profanity comes from profaning the name of God. And although God has entrusted the people with his name, Yahweh, which means I am, I exist, I am here. We hear people say, oh God this, oh God that, oh my God. And they forget to stick the prayer on the end. That's probably a lot more troubling to me than the occasional vulgarity that comes out of somebody's mouth and they go, I'm sorry, I didn't know the pastor was here, as if that made a difference. If the pastor wasn't here, we could all have beer and swear. Yeah, that was the joke I heard this past week. Our Jewish cousins don't recognize the divinity of Christ. As Protestants, we don't recognize the authority of the Pope. And as brethren, we don't recognize each other in the Lord. That's not here. Then to me, one of the most crucial and one of the hardest for me to keep, so here is confession time, is really creating a Sabbath time. This Sabbath business does not make sense. The lunar month, 29 and a half days, is not divisible by 7. The solar year, 365 and 1/4 days, is not divisible by 7. It doesn't work out equal. But the Sabbath is given to us as a gift. Every 7 days, you better stop. I remember in my first church there was a man who was working 7 days a week because he could. The aerospace industry was going great. He was constantly working 7 days a week in overtime. And then his marriage fell apart. And then his life fell apart. He had never put in the spaces in his life. For many of us, the Sabbath is either another one of those pocket gods where we say, you're not allowed to do this and you're not allowed to do that. And I remember the days when we didn't do this or that or the other. When really what is neat, you want to go back? Yeah, okay. I shouldn't talk that way, to God. Just stay there. I mean, you come out when you're ready. Don't wait on me. But anyway, it's not about what I stop you from doing. It's about whether I let God enter into time and transform it into a space of rest. It's whether I decide I'm worth it to take care of myself, to do something different. And that's really important because it never stops. We never get done. And yet God institutes this like all the laws, not just for the rich and wealthy. All the rich and the wealthy shall keep the Sabbath day holy. It doesn't say that. It says everybody. The rich and poor. The creatures of the earth. The land, as we learn elsewhere in the law. You keep the Sabbath day holy. You give the land a rest. You give the animals a rest. You give yourself a rest. Some of the other ones help us to create boundaries. Don't steal. Recognize boundaries of relationship. Don't kill. Don't bear false witness. Those are important because some people say, I don't want any rules, There's too many laws. There's too many rules. But we've seen what happens when there's the breakdown of law and rule, and it is total anarchy. Having rules keeps us safe and keeps us secure. The one about the parents is interesting because it's the one that mentions a reward. You shall honor your father and your mother so that your days may be long in the land that I am giving you. Well, not every father and every mother is worth honoring. Some of us don't do as good a job as others. But the real point is that when we honor the most vulnerable members of society, the very young and the very old, we are creating safety and security like these other commandments. We are saying that when you cease to be useful, you will not cease to be cared for and loved. And so we can't guarantee that an individual's days will be long because they honor their father and mother, but as a society we have strength. We will last longer precisely because we're not throwing people off the slate of the wolves so we all go a little faster. We are seeing people's value not in the amount of work they can produce, but in the quality of the relationships we have developed with them. So that's a very important one too. I think if I obey any commandment, it's probably the one about coveting what belongs to others, because over time I've learned I don't want what other people have because then I get all their baggage. There really is no greener grass. Sometimes, when I was younger, I would sometimes say, boy, I'd like their paycheck. But I realized I don't want to put in their hours. Or I wish I had all their stuff, but then I'd have their family. I mean, mine is toxic enough. We always used to say back when our kids lived at home that we put the fun back in dysfunctional. But in the end, if I obey any of them, is I don't want what other people have. I may delight in the fact that they have it. I may be happy for them. But it does me no good. So at least there I can, is that all right? I can mention this? Yeah. At least there I can stand on the pedestal and go, look at me, I'm so good. As for the rest of them, I'm doing the best I can. And we're all doing the best we can. These 10 words, our Hebrew cousins called them the 10 words. These 10 words don't need protecting. I went out of town for 12 years, and you folks brought in daylight savings time, first of all. And I can see some casualties of daylight savings time just looking around here. I know there's certain people that just gave up trying to get up, and I don't blame them. That's the one thing, But the other thing is you went and had a big to-do over the 10 Commandments in front of the courthouse because the world was going to fall apart if they weren't there, for everybody to read. You hadn't even begun to argue which version of the 10 Commandments you were using. Folks, there is this mistaken impression that our God is so weak, that our God really is only just a puppet on somebody's hand, that this God needs protecting and God's words need protecting. God does not need protecting. If there's one thing we have seen from the history of the world, is God is just fine. The 10 Commandments do not need protecting. The 10 Commandments need observing. If we put the energy which people put into lawsuits, legal fights, millions of dollars all across the country in order to make sure that the 10 Commandments had their proper place in some wall, instead of making sure they were inscribed on their heart and that they could recite them and live them, the world would be a better place. The best place for us to display the Ten Commandments is in our lives. Well, whether you count them as 3 about God and 7 about human relationships, whether you count them as 4 about God and 6 about human relationships, whether you think there's 10, 11, 12, or 13, whether you do like Jesus did and said, I can get it down to 2. It's kind of like name that tune. I can get these 10 commandments down to 2. Whatever you do, the important thing is to live and to love and to observe that God's Word has a place in your heart and in your life. And if you do that, the world will be improved far more than if they're on display in a place where nobody ever looks at them and certainly never observes them either. Maybe I didn't get to watch the Old Man from U.N.C.L.E. show, which was too rough. But my parents did make sure that I had access to these 10 commandments and that I learned about them, and that I learned to love them, and that I learned to live them. Amen.